It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And tonight we have an actress from one of the most famous shows of all time, The Walking Dead. And her name is Vanessa Dimitropoulos. And there she is. And I said her name right. Okay, so let me get her in here properly. That looks like it worked. There you go. You should be on it any second. I hope. Good.
Yay! Okay.
That was so easy. That's excellent.
Yes.
All right. So Vanessa, I just introduced you, and I'll just say your name again and see if I get it right. Vanessa Dimitropoulos.
You got it. You got it. It looks a lot harder than it is. If in your phonetics.
I know. I speak a little Hungarian. I know phonetics.
There you go.
Yeah.
Some people ask me if it's Polish. I'm like, you don't know your phonetics. I don't think you know your phonetics. Those are skis.
Right. Right. So Vanessa, you and I met through a common friend and colleague, Tracy Malone,
Yes.
who just came out with her best-selling book, Divorcing Your Narcissist. You Can't Make This Shit Up. And so you guys connected. She knew that you and I would connect and do, get along like this. And I'm so glad she introduced us. And I'm psyched because this is just the first one of our interviews. We're going to do one here. We're going to do one on your podcast. And I have a feeling we might not even finish today's conversation because I probably only have about 45 minutes. I usually don't, but I have to actually in real life go to an appointment. So let's just get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So you were in The Walking Dead and The Big Short. So tell us a little bit about your background and from how you got from there to here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm still a little nervous because I'm not used to being in front of the camera anymore. I've been off and away from that whole thing for a while, partly to do with what happened, which we'll get into later. But, I started pursuing professional acting at the age of 32, and which was a little late to get in the game, but I happened to live in New Orleans at the time, and it was a major film industry hub. I got into some classes, I got an agent, I started working. It's all I ever wanted to do since as long as I could remember. And that was my career for about 11 years. And it's also been kind of the reason that I was so poorly treated and targeted. And what happened to me was used as a way to not only smear my character, but essentially, smear my career. So what happened to me is what led me to become an advocate for for the victims of this type of abuse. It's gnarly. It's awful. I'm sure anybody that's watching this knows, because if it's almost impossible to even fathom how awful this is unless you've been through it. So it's 2.5 years later, but I just decided at some point that I was going to flip the script. They used my sliver of notoriety and use that to tarnish my name and to try to destroy me in many ways. And I just decided that, hey, I'm going to take everything they did and I'm going to take this spotlight that's on me for having done this as a way of reacting to what they did to me. And I'm going to change the spotlight to shine on how awful this abuse is and why we need psychological abuse law reformation.
Yeah, because we know that's one of the most common kinds of abuse. Like everybody in these relationships, toxic relationships, deals with psychological abuse. And because there's no bruises, visible bruises,
right?
People don't seem to take it as seriously. Right. And you often hear the line, well, at least he or she didn't hit you. It's like, at least, like, this is worse in a lot of ways.
Right,
because once you're out, and we'll get into this later, like even when you're physically out of these relationships, their voice is in your head, and what they've done, the after effects, especially with smear campaigns and what we'll talk about, they stick with you. And like you said, when your name is tarnished, like, what can you do?
It's awful. It's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's now talk about because we had a couple of conversations before this live, and we got a lot that we covered. I'm like, we got to have a few conversations live and thereafter.
There's so much, you know. There's so I know I had a feeling as I was writing notes to all the kind of things we thought we might discuss. Like, I don't know if we're going to get through all of this, but hey, we can make some good headway today.
Right, and we'll just schedule part 2 for whatever we don't finish.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about how toxic people learn to push your buttons. And can you use that to describe what happened in your own life and also what reactive abuse is? Because that's something I didn't learn for a while. And then I was like, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, I think that anyone close to us could potentially push our buttons, right? They know you that well. Your annoying little brother knows exactly what to do to drive you nuts for the rest of the night. But when you take someone who is a narcissist, of course, they're they're not doing it to be annoying. They're doing it to chip away at your mental health. In my case, the person that I was with was actually a future mental health therapist. He was getting his master's in counseling. And of course, when we met, and to be honest, I mean, I was countless of our friends, even my therapist, I was like, oh my, I have the healthiest relationship of my life. It's this fairy tale, you know, we know I can't believe I'm this lucky. I was so grateful every day. We really connected because of acting, and just I'm an inquisitive person and I like to work on myself and understand why people behave the way they do. I've always kind of studied psychology just as a hobby, and so we really connected. So not only did I share because he was my partner, but I shared even more because we could discuss, you know, my childhood and my adolescent and everything on a very deep level and look at it with a psychological lens. And we loved doing that. And we were both working on ourselves, yada, yada. Now, on his side, you know, this wasn't just a partner who was listening to these shares. He had an academic advantage in his access to my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put it that way, it sounds like rape, a mental rape, because it's essentially what it is. So anything that I had discussed, for instance, the thing that comes to mind is just before I had met him, I turned 40, and out of nowhere, this anger was coming out of, like, it was with myself. Like, I was in a shower one day and I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening to me? And I, you know, processed all that. And I realized that because my father was a very abusive person and extremely angry. Well, because I was such a go-getter and I wanted to change my life and not have anything to do with, not have a life like that growing up. I didn't want that in my adulthood. So, you know, I went to college, I owned a business when I was really young. I never let my childhood dictate the future that I would have. I never wanted to play victim or use the victim card. But what I realized just after I turned 40 was I was so busy making sure I didn't play the victim that I didn't even acknowledge the fact that I had been a victim. And so I really had to sit with that because I see people sometimes that kind of drag out their victimhood, so to speak, and, oh, but this happened to me and this happened. Yes, and it happened to you and it's valid and it's good that you're acknowledging it. But if you're sitting there using that as an excuse to do crappy things to other people or why you can't show up in your own life, there are reasons and there are excuses and there are differences. So I just sorry, and I just want to let you know I do lose my train of thought. It's one of the things that's kind of happened is my memory's like shot, and if I even dangle over here for 1 second, I kind of lose it. So
Vanessa, this happens with like a lot of people that we talk to. They're always like,
okay.
excuse me, I'm going to go on a tangent. And I'm like, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
That's all the
Okay.
time.
Well,
So don't
thank
worry
you
about
for
it.
understanding. So I was talking about anger. So when I met him, I had just come out of processing, and I found Pima Chodron. She, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it was actually There's one of these books. Oh, The Places That Scare You. And I
Uh-huh.
open it up and it's a page. I just go, huh? And it's a page on anger. I'm like, okay, well, here we go. Let's do this. So I dig in, and I loved how vulnerable she was. And she spoke about anger, which, as you know, it's not really acceptable in society unless you're going to a hockey game and you pay people to beat the crap out of each other. But other than that, you shouldn't be expressing your anger, especially as a woman. It's not ladylike. So here I was understanding that there was anger that I hadn't tapped into, because something I heard a while ago, a while ago actually, was sometimes we don't process trauma and it doesn't even come up for us until we're older, because our bodies and minds are now prepared to handle the processing of that trauma. So it's very possible that after I turned 40, I was finally in a place where I could acknowledge and tap into that. So that brings me back to this person.
Let's pause for 1 second. What you just said, a lot of times we've heard that often children of narcissists also don't realize it until they're in their 40s. And I never knew why. What could be a reason? I think you just gave a possible reason, is that your body and brain isn't ready to process it until that age. So that's really interesting. All right, sorry, keep going.
Well, no, that's okay. Well, that and the fact that our generation didn't really have the term narcissist. Like, we might have heard gaslight as a movie, but it really started trending a couple years ago. And so I know that for me, when I found out what narcissism was at that level, I it was like all of a sudden I had the words to define all the definitions that I was seeing. I was seeing this, but like I said to him once, do you know why your mom always says family first? She's trying to keep you loyal. I didn't know that was the motto of the narcissistic family cult. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, so yeah, I shared about my anger. We had a very open relationship where I would say, if you see me doing this, can you please let me know? Because it's something that I'm working on. The difference in my anger and his anger, or his rage, was, I can acknowledge, I know when I'm getting angry, and I have empathy. I don't use anyone's anger to hurt them. And that's what he did. So he took everything that he knew that would rattle me. And I had actually shared with him many times over the course of a year and a half that I did not feel comfortable around his sister, that I didn't feel safe, and that if she was a girl at high school, I would stay the hell away from her because I felt like she was dangerous. So who do you think he brought to my apartment to provoke me the day that I got arrested? And I had asked him not to bring her there anymore because of all of the disturbances she caused. So he knew that. He knew I was very uncomfortable with big families just because I didn't have one. I've never been a group person. I've had friends that are in groups, but in a group or a tribe, sometimes there's one person that's a little off, but the whole group has to stay together. So they dismiss, sounding like a narcissistic cult, right? They dismiss that. And I said, well, I can't really be in a group when I'm watching this stuff happen. And that family was extremely toxic. So I saw them fighting, like full on, getting into fights with each other. I had never done that. I had never been arrested. I had never, I'm a touchy person. So I might go, hey, guess what I saw today? But it's never like an angry, malicious attack on somebody. So yeah, he used every single fear. And what was worse is these were things that I was working on. And just before the discard, I had been piecing myself together after a car accident. And I was, trying to get into real estate. I wanted to go to law school. I was networking in the community. I wanted to run for city council. And as he saw me dig myself out of this hole, that's when the discard happened, of course. And it was, of course, out of the blue. So he used all of that. And then, well, I'll just leave it at that for now. That's how they use it. They'll take anything that you shared with them. And for a mental health professional or, future one. If I was a client of his and I had shared this stuff, can you imagine how utterly inhumane and wrong it would have been for him to smear me? Now, I was his partner, and although there's a uh, patient client privilege, what about partner privilege?
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know if one was more important than the other. I know that this is the person I lived with for a year and a half and thought I was going to marry. So I didn't feel like I couldn't be safe with this person.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, so do you want to get into like the term reactive abuse and just apply it to
Sure.
how he did it?
Sure. So, from the time he left the apartment, until the day that they showed up with the police. And just for everybody watching, I know it's probably like, well, what actually happened? I haven't actually said it yet, but I will explain. So I hadn't eaten much. I hadn't slept much. I lost about 20 pounds in a month. I didn't It wasn't just a breakup. At this point in my life, I think I was 43 or something, and I had been through breakups before. I had been married before. I had never experienced anything like this that was literally out of the blue, to the point where you're trying to know which way is up. So not only did I go through the breakup, which is heartbreaking, of course, but I didn't know where it came from. And we were just doing fine the week before. He had said, or a couple weeks before, he had said, Vanessa, if we get in an argument, or if we, have an issue, it's just a speed bump. You don't have to get into fight or flight. You don't have to pack your bags. He literally, and I never relaxed so much in my life before he said, I literally just relaxed for the first time in my life. And then to have him do that almost immediately after. So I'm trying to figure out what's what. I can't even believe what's happening. And on top of that, I made the mistake of not moving to LA, or basically leaving LA to move down to Orange County, which isn't a film community. I was working my way up in the production world, doing PA work, but I became a second assistant director on a big music video. I was doing well. And after I moved in with him, things just started going south in every area of my life. It's just like the energy of what was around me was affecting. I mean, to the point that I got a cyst on my neck, and that's when I knew it was real. So, so here I am, the state that I am, sleep deprived, hadn't eaten much. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how it even could have happened. And he had already called the police on me a couple times. After he yelled at me behind closed doors, and I followed him out as he ran down the stairs, and I said what I wanted to say, he called the police. I didn't follow him. I didn't touch him, blah, blah. He edited a video to make it sound like I told him to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, a few days before the arrest, I wrote him a very diplomatic text message, because he kept blocking me and only would write to me when he had to stop by the apartment. Mm-hmm. So he was finally leaving it unblocked. And I wrote a long message letting him know, we had an animal, and I said, you need to come and take care of them, because he literally left me living with his rabbit and didn't clean the cage for over 2 weeks. The entire apartment smelled. It was really gross. And he would, I knew that, and that was the other thing. I knew that I was going to have to move, but how could I even think about where I was moving, I mean, I didn't know anything, because this is the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. So we had our plans. So it wasn't just a breakup and we're both in college and we know what we're doing with our lives. I literally had to start a whole new life and didn't know where that was going to be. So then I write this letter and I just say, please stop intimidating me. Stop harassing me. I need you to just leave me alone, and I will move, and you need to tell your mom. So I was communicating with him what my plans were as I knew them. He was not telling her, though. She was the guarantor on our apartment. And I think what happened, just to back up a little, I think that summer, so I stood up for us and I said, hey, you know, I'd really appreciate it if you didn't discuss your finances with me. That's between you and him. And I love you both, but I think it would be great if you got on the same page about stuff. Never, never changed. After that, Lisa, it was like, that's when everything started happening. Essentially, what I believe is she gave him an ultimatum. You get rid of her or I cut you off.
Wait, she said that about you?
No, I'm certain that's what happened. I'm certain that's what happened because she got mad at me for speaking up. Like,
Yeah.
we're adults. Why are you in our relationship? And why are you dragging me into your finance? She would always have me try to tell him stuff. She called her own son weak, lazy, da da da. And I had a panic attack because I couldn't believe that she was saying this about her own son. I had a panic attack. So,
Well, that's
anyways,
that empathy.
oh, yes. And he looked at me, he goes, what's happening to you? You've never had a panic attack as long as I've known you. And I didn't tell him what she said, but I said, your mom said things that are just not nice about you. And I've been holding it in because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. So, so I write this letter, you know, stop intimidating, stop harassing me. Please don't bring your sister here. You know, I'm afraid of big families. And I have a weird thing with people with money just because of like poverty mentality and all that kind of stuff. So I get really intimidated around, not as much anymore, but around people with money. And that was about 5 days before the morning of the incident. So he essentially took literally everything I told him I was afraid of. Plus, he knew how distressed I was. He knew that I went into fight or flight, but I had never fought before. I had only flew, you know. So on this morning, I was leaving my apartment with a friend who I was taking to the airport. And as she and I were driving out, I saw a big U-Haul. I saw 3 cops, and I saw my ex and his whole family and friends there, standing there. I didn't have a heads up.
Sounds like an audience.
Yeah. And they were just waiting by the leasing office. So when I drove by, I got out, I said, what's going on? And the cop said, well, you know, he came to get his stuff. He sent you a message. And I looked on my phone and it said, I'll be by to pick up some of my belongings. So they were laughing at me. I was out of my mind. I didn't even know what to say. I didn't think to say, wait a minute here. The police said to me, we have receipts. So his mother brought the receipts for the furniture we had been using for a year and a half, but she had no right to the apartment as a tenant. I didn't think about all this. So essentially, they forced me to let them in, but they said that I told them that only he and one friend could come in and move stuff. So I was sitting at the table watching him, you know, take everything, the bed, the refrigerator. The cops were like, oh, they were so nice. They brought you coolers, styrofoam coolers for your food. They took the couch, the Wi-Fi. They took our cat, which I'm the one that found the cat. I was yelling, like sitting in a chair, trying to explain to the cops. And then as he was walking by, I was trying to reach him and yelling like, so you did this and you did that. And of course, I'm just making myself look more crazy because everything that they said to the cops, well, she's an actress. Don't believe anything she said. Oh, crocodile tears. Oh, you know, da, 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 da. And look how many times she's been called on before. So they had this whole
We
thing.
basically laid the groundwork ahead of time.
And to top it all off, his stepfather was the former sheriff of the county where I was arrested for 30 years. So how do you think he got 3 cops to show up on a Saturday morning?
Yeah. So with that reactive abuse, it's like you were set up. The foundation was already laid with calling the cops on you a few times before, and then also shocking you with like making you feel really safe just a week beforehand, and then boom, the discard.
Yeah, well, the safety thing was probably 2 months before because the discard was very like drawn out. But yes,
yeah.
So I couldn't take it anymore. And like every other visit, when he came by, I would leave the apartment. And if a friend was there, because I had to have people come over to help me to get dressed. I couldn't even put my pants on, Lisa. I couldn't stop shaking. So, like every other time, I left the apartment. But if there was a friend or a neighbor, I would just say, "Can you text me when they're gone?" This time, when I left my apartment, I turned. I lived on the end apartment right next to the staircase. Immediately turned down the stairs, and I was looking down at the steps because I was going fast. And then I saw something, and I looked up, and it was his sister standing there with her cell phone recording me. She was already recording me. So I did what I did, which was, I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I've never touched anyone's personal property. This is like it. I flipped her off. I called her the C word. Then I took the phone so carefully out because I didn't want to touch her, and I threw it over the balcony. And then I turned around and I kept going down the stairs. And then I heard his stepfather go, "There she goes," in the background. And then the sister told the cops that I assaulted her. They immediately like arrested me. Wouldn't let me use the restroom, wouldn't let me get any feminine products, dragged me off to the jail. And they set it all up, and they put her there because I told him for a year, and I had journal entries from after 3 or 4 months of dating saying, is he going to talk to her about her jealousy? You need to focus on work. You need to keep your head down. It's the only way you're going to survive. And I meant this family. That was 3 months into our relationship. So got arrested, came back. They were still there. And she's yelling at me, "You're homeless. You can't afford to live here. This isn't your home." Just nasty, 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 nasty. So that was it. They laid the groundwork. He knew my deepest fears. He knew how I hurt so easily. I mean, I really hurt for other people. I hurt for animals. He knew that, and he was kind of the golden child, and basically just sided with them in the end.
Yeah, and I mean that's like a perfect example of reactive abuse. It's like baiting you and then capturing on film only your reaction when nobody knows everything that led up to it.
Right, exactly. So
that.
that way, when TMZ called a week later, and by the way, I almost committed suicide the night of the arrest. When TMZ called me a week later, I told them, I'm suicidal. Please do not do this to me. I am really barely hanging on here. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't publish any of my story. And then they released it on Christmas Eve. And what did they release? My yelling once I'm already arrested, and yelling and saying, "You said," because he had always said he didn't want to live by his sister and his mom. He just wanted to get the hell away from them. And one random day he said, "If I ever had to pick between them and you, it will always be you." It was just a bizarre statement. Well, on the day of my arrest, I was yelling, "You said you would pick me." I mean, I just, so all of that's what they took. And if you look through the TMZ comments, I mean, it's disgusting what they said. And they did that on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I mean, so this isn't even just reactive abuse and all the psychological stuff, but to have what happened be so public and for people
Yes.
to not know the details, but only see the one snippet and to pass judgment.
Right.
I mean, I can't even imagine.
My reaction. So have you heard that phrase, my rational response to your irrational behavior?
Right.
And that's exactly what it was, So,
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, first of all, if I wasn't on The Walking Dead or had any sort of celebrity, which I loved all the headlines, Walking Dead star, I'm like, oh, hi. I hardly said anything. But if I was a person who was not in that industry, well, then of course there would be nothing to publicize.
Exactly.
It's not fair that because I was on the show that the media and whoever gets to attack me, or that anyone would be okay with publicizing this. And that's hurt me in the long run. It's 2.5 years later. I'm still not working. And everybody Googles you now. So there's an article that says I smashed and beat the woman. I didn't even touch her. I didn't even lay a finger on her. And so anyone, if I go apply for work, they're going to see that. They're going to look it up. Or my charges that were standing until just this past May. So this happened December 2019. Right before the pandemic, I went to my arraignment. They said the DA is further reviewing the case. Then we go into the pandemic. My real estate license is on hold because I thought my charges would go away, but then I kept getting delays. My court case got delayed like 4 or 5 times. So I wrote a long report to the Real Estate Commission in California where I passed my test and wanted my license. It took them 7 months to respond. I even included literature on narcissistic abuse. I mean, I went all out. Got the license, but I had already moved. So now I'm in another state, pass my class, go to apply for the license, and my charges show up from California. And so the judge offered me a dismissal through a divergence, something like that, where in order to avoid trial, I had to pay $100 and do community service, but the charges are getting dismissed. Apparently this week, my lawyer's getting them. But for 2.5 years, and when I even go apply for a job, I had a contractor who, after he found out I was an actress, because his daughter's an actress, we got to talking, he never showed up to my house to do the work.
See, that's the thing. It's like you're saying, even if these charges get dropped, and this is 2.5 years later, you still have to contend with how your reputation's been affected by this.
You can still find everything online. And those services that vary, there was one, they charge like $2,500 a month for online reputation management.
Wow. Wow.
And that's just that stuff, not even the physical, the mental, you know.
Right. Yeah. And then we have to talk about that too. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And of course, people who don't know anything about this kind of abuse, they just won't believe you, no matter what.
Because sometimes they say, it's funny, when I think about it, I go, well, okay, so he yelled, so he lied, so he cheated. So when you say that to someone, you're like, yeah, that's like 50% of the relationships out there. It's almost impossible to convey the magnitude of the deviancy and the maliciousness that goes in. This is calculated. There were things that, I had shared with him about when I was younger. I never knew how to break up with someone because I was always too worried about hurting feelings. I couldn't break up with someone until I had someone else. I wouldn't sleep with them, but I just needed to know, as a codependent, I wasn't going to be alone. Now, what did he turn that into? Oh, I'm a narcissist going to get supply. I know in his mind that's what it was. Because if you look at a lot of the traits and the behaviors of a codependent, they're kind of similar, but they're for completely different reasons. I don't do this because I'm trying to hurt you. I don't want to hurt somebody. I just don't know how to stand up for myself. I don't know my value. I don't know my worth. This person is taking every pain in my life and says, on this day I'll do this, and then I'll hide this, and then I'll involve this person. It's so calculating.
Right. And this is what they enjoy. They enjoy because it's a game to them. And, our specialty is legal abuse and people dealing with all kinds of abuse through the court system and having an audience and a stage, try to convince new people, different experts, and get like the same kind of, they derive pleasure out of inflicting pain on people. So let's talk a little bit about, because you said how when the police came, you would have done things differently. And so then, it's not just you, it's hard. It feels like it's just you when these things happen, but I know so many of our clients have the same situation, different details, but they're arrested on false allegation charges. And so you had said that not only do you think police should do something differently, but people involved in these situations should know how to behave when the police arrive on a scene. Can you share a little bit about that, just in case? Because I am sure there's people who either are watching now or who will have to deal with this or who have dealt with it that could learn something.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, it's obviously important, and hopefully, I mean, it's one of those like catch-22s, like how could you know unless you know, but you don't know about this abuse until it's like done and over with. And then you're looking back going, oh, it was this and it was this and it was that. So let's say you're in that relationship and you do believe that your person is a narcissist. Well, let's talk about what to expect out of them. You know, they will call the police on you more than once. They have already slandered you to everybody. Basically, what they're doing is building the case so that when you react, they can say, see, I told you she was crazy. I told you she had anger issues. And real quick, about 2 months before, like right before we broke up, he had raged at me about something. And then he told me I had an anger problem. So I started therapy for other stuff, stagnation of career. Hopefully this is still going because you're it looks like it's buffering or something.
Oh,
But
I can
anyways,
still hear you, but I'm frozen.
okay. Sorry, and I'm sweating up a storm. So basically, I said to him one day, when I go to therapy for, you know, career and all that other kind of stuff, I'm also going to talk to her about anger management. And he said, why? I said, because you said I have an anger problem. He goes, you don't have an anger problem. I said, are you sure? You said. He goes, you do not need anger management.
Oh, God. I don't know why I'm frozen on this screen, but I'm shaking my head.
But you look great.
No, and I'm frozen.
I know.
That's so weird. It's like you took a picture.
Are you able to pause it and then unpause it?
Wait a sec. Let's see. Yeah.
Oh, here you are.
I don't know what happened. Okay, keep going.
So basically, if you're in this and you expect to have the police called on you, like our goal is to, first of all, our goal is to get the hell out of there. We got to get out, right? But let's say you can't for whatever reason just yet, whatever the reason is. Let's talk about what to expect. The smear campaigns, you know, they're building this behind the scenes. You don't know any of this is happening because they're so two-faced, right? You expect the cops to be called on you. Okay. Expect to be provoked. Okay. So when the police arrive, what can you do to prove the narcissist wrong? You can stay calm. You can ask, and unfortunately, many police officers are also narcissistic. There's a lot of misogyny. They wouldn't even, oh, I was treated so poorly by the cops, I can't even tell you. And he also knew I kind of had a fear of authority because I did grow up in an abusive home and I didn't trust authority figures.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing is absolutely remain calm. It's almost like you have to, you know, when you've got an enemy, you have to think like the enemy. I never learned how to play chess until this. No.
Hi, everyone. So sorry about that. My phone was not charging and it ran out of battery and needed to recharge for another 2 minutes. So sorry. Anyway, we're going to welcome Vanessa back on and have her finish her question. And then we just have like a few more minutes before I have to run out.
Okay. Yay! I was able to go flip the AC on. I was worried about sound. Okay, I'm dying over here. It's humid over here.
That's good because my dog was panting really loudly and I had to keep like waving a paper to make him go. Now he's over there panting loudly. So anyway, okay. So we were talking about with the police and when you get arrested or not even before you get arrested, but to expect like the smear campaign almost before the grooming, I'd say, of how crazy or unfit or whatever your issues are that they set up before they do their big production of getting you in trouble. And so you were talking about how one of the most important things is when the police arrive is to stay calm. And I was thinking that's also so often in court when we talk about presentation with our clients, it's the same thing. You have to try to stay calm because you want them to believe you. And often somebody who is, we always say, a manipulative con artist, they don't have a conscience, they don't care, they're comfortable lying. And people who are victims of coercive control or domestic abuse, and especially something with this leading up to a discard, we're like an emotional wreck. So of course we're going to present as more crazy. So we have to try to be as calm as possible because people who walk into these situations don't know who's telling the truth, and they'll often go with the one who seems more relaxed because they think they have to be telling the truth. That's why they're calm, right?
Yeah, it's funny. You've seen it in scenes, in movies, and I've heard it in conversations. Well, if you're not lying, why are you getting so upset? That never
Exactly.
sat well with me, because I thought I'm upset because I'm being accused of something I didn't do, and that is more upsetting to me than if
Well,
I
also
were lying
not being
about it.
believed, not being
Right.
believed when you're telling the truth is very upsetting.
Yes. So that's why when people used to say that to me, I'm like, well, that never made sense to me. So I think that, we have to go into this knowing that we have to go into this with the intention of proving the narcissist wrong. And I know my own attorney made comments to me like, you need to, he was not very nice to me, but he said, you need to get off your emotional roller coaster. Like, he didn't get it, of course. And that's not helping me, of course. And, how do you, listen, we need to win, and we have to weigh out, what are we going to will ourselves to do? Are we going to will ourselves to allow any emotion? We're not saying suppress the emotion permanently. We're not saying ignore what's going on in your body. No. What we're saying is, you've got to compartmentalize. You got to say, I'm feeling this. But I need to put it on the shelf for now, because if that comes in, it's only going to work against you. So how are you going to prove that narcissist wrong? How are you going to prove that he's the liar and you're the sane one? Just be everything that he said you're not. That's how. So staying calm. One of the things I do before I have pretty heavy conversations, or pretty much every time I had to talk to my lawyer, was get on the ground, sit there, pray, obviously, for some guidance and just some support. But also, I would do this little mantra: everything that I communicate is delivered and received with, compassion and clarity. Everything that I deliver in my communication is received with compassion and clarity. I would just say that several times to myself to get myself in the mindset. It calmed my body. I could relax a little. And the other thing is, when we're victims, we're filled with fear. And one thing that I learned in acting is, it's usually the person who's like this who loses all their power. But the person who's kind of sitting back like this, they have the power. So when you're in that room with the narcissist and you're sitting back and you're totally relaxed in your chair, that's going to drive him nuts, because that is not the narrative he gave to his lawyer, to the cops, to his family, to your friends, to the judge. So just prove him wrong,
Yeah.
I wish I would have known
and
that then.
right. I know. How many of us have said that line how many times? Yeah. I want to comment on the thing you said about your lawyer, and how it's almost like I hear how stressful it was for you to even communicate with your lawyer. And that's a big thing in our world, because most of our people are dealing with lawyers. And a lot of times they feel like the lawyer is beyond not helpful, but actually making things worse. Often our clients will say that when they contact their lawyer, especially with these emergency emotional issues, the lawyer won't get back to them. And they take it very hard.
Yes, of
Because
course.
in a way,
That's your advocate.
right, exactly. Your lawyer's supposed to be your advocate. And people coming out of these psychologically abusive relationships often see it as a replay of what happened in the relationship. Like, my lawyer's giving me the silent treatment. Like, it's the same thing I was dealing with my ex. Like, I can't deal with this. But the thing to remember is, because we do have attorneys that we love that are good, some are really good and some are advocates. And one of the ones that we really like told us that lawyers, his name is Rayford Palmer, just to give him credit, he's a Chicagoland family attorney. And he said that in law school, lawyers are trained in 90% law and 10% client relations. But when you go out and start practicing, you realize that it's 90% client relations and 10% law. So people have to know lawyers are not trained to handle these situations. And most lawyers, I mean, we're, we deal a lot with like divorce attorneys, but they're not trained and they're not comfortable with it. So it's almost like expecting someone to do something who has no idea how to handle it. And that's why it's so important to get support from elsewhere. And that, just a little plug for Chris and I is like being high conflict divorce coaches is you need emotional support. But leaning on your attorney, which many of us make that mistake, they're not the emotional support because they're also super expensive. And they have tons of clients, but they're only dealing with a fraction of cases like yours. Like so many of our people sit when they come on calls with us or in legal abuse support group, they'll say, my lawyer said they've never seen anything like this in their entire career. And we're like, oh my God, like every time we have, my lawyer said the same thing. Like, I don't know why this is happening. So they're not accustomed to these crazy, crazy situations. So unfortunately, like we hope to educate more attorneys. Like we've trained attorneys in coercive control, but many lawyers are not, they just don't get it. And hopefully some of the good ones will start reaching out, like some of the ones we know, and saying, can you teach us about coercive control? Because we don't understand.
Yeah.
They're just like the police who aren't educated, don't understand psychological abuse. They don't understand what led up to the scene. They just see the scene and they have to make quick decisions. You know, and that's why it's so important. And that's why what you're doing is so important too, with, really putting a focus on the psychological abuse, the things that people can't see, those invisible bruises.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you take the whole legislative arena, the legal system, the lawyers, the cops, they don't know. And it's not until there's reformation of these laws that anything can change, because cops only do, what they're told, but they only enforce laws. If something's not a law, then it's not in the realm of awareness.
Exactly. And they can't do anything about it. Even if they understand it, they can't do anything about it.
Right. I mean, if they understood it, like in the Gabby Petito case, what to look for, like, wait a minute, she's the one that has this and just something's not adding up, blah, blah, blah. Like if we know that in these situations, the narcissist is usually the one that calls first. And then you get to the scene and something else isn't adding up and you look at that. I mean, when I saw the picture of her in the cop car, this is exactly what I look like in the back of the cop car. I mean, I just, so yeah, we need law reformation. I mean, psychological abuse is the only abuse that's not criminalized in this country. And there are in some states, emotional distress, coercive control, but it's not federal law. And I'm sure they're thinking, well, they pick those abusers, they're picking abusers. So it's not that it's our fault, but just is very black and white, not like, oh, there's something wounded in us. That this was something like I literally set out to pick the most perfect person and thought that I did. I didn't go pick an abuser, right?
That's what people don't understand. Like nobody would date an abuser. If that person behaved their way at the beginning of the relationship, who would want to be with him or her?
I mean, in a lot of domestic violence cases, a lot of people do. But let's say someone who is healthy finds another healthy person. Like my goal was to find a very healthy person, and I did. It wasn't until later that it all and that's what people don't understand is the narcissist is. I said to him one day, if you're such a good therapist, and I'm, what did I say? If I'm so crazy and you're such a good therapist, then why did it take you 1.5 years to figure it out? And then the other thing I said. The other thing I realized was he was a much better actor than I will ever be in my lifetime. A much better actor.
With no training in acting, right?
No, in fact, he wouldn't even go in front of an audience. He had a major fear of being in front of people. And it was all the stuff I read about narcissists. And here I was kind of in the spotlight. I'm a pretty outgoing person. I really make friends wherever I go. He'd even like steal my jokes and pass them off as his. I'm like, what that was mine.
That's really common. We talked about that. Yep.
So, but until there's a reformation of these laws, and I know they don't want to clog up the system, but look, a narcissist, and I'm sure we all understand, and we're talking about people on the spectrum, you know, with the zero empathy. There's no reforming them. There's no reforming. I mean, the only chance is like a narcissistic injury where it just kind of shatters that ego, like obliterates it. And but how's that going to happen? They need to be put away, for lack of better words. They need to be isolated. One, so they can't hurt anybody else. And if there's any chance of reform, because these are still human beings we're talking about, although they don't behave like human beings, they behave like machines. There's a wounded child in there that was so shamed by a parent that they became this false self. How sad is that? And that's why they are who they are now. So not to excuse their behavior, but we've got to remember how this happened. That's why part of our mission is to end the trauma and abuse cycle. This is generational. You either become a continued victim, or you become the abuser, or you're the scapegoat. You get the hell out. You do things entirely differently. There's really only three ways that it's going to go. You know, you got to make that choice. So we do have to criminalize this. We do need convictions in this, and slowly with that, and people coming forward with so many platforms available to share, people don't feel like they're the first ones now. Just like I'm sure when the first rape case was ever actually heard in public, I mean, how many women, I'm going to say women is the majority, right? How many women stepped forward after that? But nobody wants to be the first. Okay, well, I'm one, you're one, Tracy's one. There's a lot of us, you know, and it's time to really start speaking up about this, which means, one, keep track of everything. Two, be the one to file the complaints. I don't care how petty it is. I think if you're in a relationship and someone rages against you and you know that this is going down that road, go file a complaint just to have it on record. Do your own. I'm not saying smear. I'm saying tell the truth. Get those complaints down. When the court starts saying, like, what the hell is this? There's all these kind of similar themes to these complaints. Okay, there's that. We need to speak up about it. We need to share our stories, and we need to. And I notice this in this community. A lot of people aren't doing this. We need to look with deep within. There is something in us that was targeted. And even though we might be the empath, many of the victims were codependent. We saw things that probably should have been red flags, even in the narcissist. And we thought, but they're too perfect. That's impossible. It's so covered with them. So you really, and then you're questioning your own worth, and you go, I'm just so lucky to meet this amazing, like, I can't believe how lucky I am. So you're like, I must be crazy. I must be trying to self-sabotage right now because I'm trying to throw away the best thing that's ever happened to me. Right? It's so confusing. So how do we work on ourselves to go, here's my value. Here are my standards. And if you don't match them, you don't belong here. I don't care how small it is. You know, we have to almost like go a little too hard. We have to kind of overcompensate right now so we can really break this cycle, right? We have to do our own work too, but we need to couple that with legislative reform. You know, we need attorneys to understand, law enforcement to understand. We need therapists to understand. How many therapists have no idea that this is real? Blows my mind.
Whole other conversation. So speaking of other conversations, Vanessa, I have to go, but we didn't even get to like the bulk of what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So we have to schedule a part 2.
Okay.
Because this is a rich conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I know you got to run. I actually have class in an hour too, so this is good timing. But thank you everybody who joined. And I saw a bunch of follows on the Escaped Goat page. And there's a website, www.theescapedgoat.com. I'm building content right now, but there'll be a podcast. I'll let Lisa know when it's out. And then maybe I'll even see before that because we'll have to do part 2.
You're definitely going to see before that because we got to schedule this next thing. Like once I get back to my appointment, I'm going to be texting you.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a good night. I appreciate you.
All right. You too, Vanessa. Thank you so much for taking the time, and you'll be back on here soon.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.